She stands symbolically on one of the most famous corners in the entertainment world. Main and Beale in Memphis, Tennessee. The corner star, on the sidewalk of stars, gives visitors a brief but telling glimpse of her rocky past. The ever-flashing marquee hints at a bustling box office and promotes the current stars of stage, screen, and popular culture. But it's the great stage within her glistening auditorium which holds the real history of the Orpheum. For over a century, this famous corner has been the entertainment hub of the Mid-South. This is the story of the new Orpheum Theatre. The story of the Orpheum begins long before she opened her doors in 1928. The year was 1890. Benjamin Harrison was president. Wyoming had just joined the Union. Construction on the Eiffel Tower in France was recently completed. And in downtown Memphis, a well-dressed society flocked to the opening of Beale Street's newest addition, the Grand Opera House. The Grand Opera House was built on the site of a former coal yard. At 4 stories high, it could seat more than 2,000 people and was reputed to be the largest stage of any theater outside of New York City. For 9 years, the Grand provided a wide variety of shows, including operas, solo performers, and recitals. But much bigger things were in store for the Grand. The turn of the century brought about rapid change in America. The first Nobel Prize was awarded. The Wright brothers took to the air with the Wright Flyer. The Boston Americans faced the Pittsburgh Pirates in the first ever World Series. And at the Grand, a new format of high-class variety show entertainment had arrived. It was called Vaudeville. Acrobatics acts, singers, dancers, comedians, even trained animals arrived by rail to entertain over 10,000 patrons each week.
In 1907, the Grand Opera House joined the Orpheum circuit of vaudeville. A lot of the great stars of that era are designated in our sidewalk of stars outside the theater. And in 1923, Houdini did his death-defying water cell escape on the stage of the now Orpheum Theatre.
Ladies and gentlemen, Harry Houdini, the water torture cell.
But in the fall of 1923, tragedy struck. Late one night, following the performance of red-hot jazz artist Blossom Seeley, a blaze broke out in an upper level of the building. By morning, the 34-year-old landmark was gone. By 1928, things were happening in Memphis. The city was considered to be the 3rd largest in the South. Construction was underway on the municipal airport. The Peabody Hotel had just moved to its new location on Union Avenue. And construction of the magnificent new Orpheum Theatre was finally complete, at an equally magnificent cost of $1.6 million. Now, those were 1928 dollars.
Theaters like this were usually in fairly large number in all the major cities in the country.
The Orpheum was considered the best of the downtown theaters, but there were other beautiful theaters downtown, the Lowe's State, the Lowe's Palace.
And all of them were in competition with each other. The guy who owned Lowe's Theaters once said, "We sell tickets to theaters, not to movies," because the whole idea was you draw your patrons in by what kind of palatial setting they get to spend the afternoon in. How big an instrument do they have to get to listen to come roaring up out of the pit?
The new Orpheum set the standard for elegance and opulent decor. The seats were covered in leather, the floors in marble, the walls in silver and gold. The mighty Wurlitzer organ would rise on its own hydraulic platform, showering the audience with melodies from midair.
Most of the theaters vied for getting Wurlitzers, and indeed in Memphis, 3 of them all had Wurlitzers. We're just fortunate that this one is still in its original configuration, in its original house, on its original orchestra lift.
The magnificent new Orpheum Theatre held a grand gala opening on November 19, 1928. After a 5-year absence, the Orpheum was back in the business of entertaining Memphis. But rocky waters were ahead. The Great Depression of 1929 dealt vaudeville a death blow and forced the Orpheum to change with the times. For every theatergoer who could scrape up the price of a ticket, more people struggled simply to keep a roof over their heads and feed their families. Throughout the turbulent 30s, the Orpheum hosted everything from flesh programming with scantily clad showgirls to big stars such as Mae West.
Well, when I'm good, I'm very good.
George Burns and Gracie Allen.
How about saying goodnight?
Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. But hard times and a parade of management companies eventually took their toll. In April of 1939, this beautiful structure that had cost $1.6 million to build sold at auction for $75,000. The buyer, M.A. Lightman. He was the sole bidder. A new form of entertainment was becoming increasingly popular and affordable. Hollywood's talking pictures. Mr. Lightman decided to make the Orpheum his flagship theater. Later that year, the Orpheum sign came down. For an entire generation of Memphians, including a young Elvis Presley, the Orpheum was known simply as the Malco. In the coming decades, this vaudeville house turned movie palace provided the perfect home for the very best of Hollywood's golden age. Blockbusters like Goldfinger, the James Bond movie that brought nearly 100,000 people to the Malco. Yes, in Memphis, the Malco was the premier location to escape from the harsh realities of life into the majestic world of cinema.
In the 70s, downtown seemed to have sort of an economic slide downward. People were moving to the suburbs. The large movie theater was not economically feasible anymore.
This migration of the middle class to the suburbs gave birth to a new kind of competitor for the downtown movie palaces, the multiplex.
Let's all go to the lobby.
The interesting part about having a one-screen theater is if you don't get the good movies, it could ruin your year. It made a lot more sense to spread your risk over 4 screens than 1.
In 1976, Malco moved its offices east, and the Orpheum once again found herself for sale. Downtown Memphis was in a sad state. As hundreds of great theaters nationwide faced the wrecking ball, the fate of the majestic structure once known as the Orpheum was very bleak indeed. In 1976, a small group of publicly minded citizens band together to impact a specific area of downtown which was deteriorating rapidly. The anchor to this effort between the river and Main Street would be the stately but sadly worn Orpheum Theatre.
And the hopes were to make it a magnet for downtown redevelopment, that if the Orpheum was open, the restaurants downtown would have patrons, and as Beale Street got redeveloped, that would be a great catalyst to bring people to both places.
On November 3, 1976, the Memphis Development Foundation purchased the Malco from Lightman for $285,000. Later that year, the Orpheum name returned to the theater, proudly displayed by a newly painted red and yellow sign.
It really was one of the pioneers in kind of relaunching what we call modern-day tourism and hospitality industry in Memphis and Shelby County.
Mignon Dunn and Sybil Shepherd both came to perform in a benefit. 2,600 seats were sold at an average of $100. And that was a big part of our initial fundraising to get the basic repairs made.
The Memphis Development Foundation would give new life to the Orpheum.
It is to the great credit of Union Planters Bank and Bill Matthews that they were the major supporter of the foundation and the theater during the first 3 years of its operation.
But 50 years had taken their toll on the grand old lady.
In the mid-'70s, when the Memphis Development Foundation took an assessment of the Orpheum, it was agreed that it was falling apart.
The roof had begun to leak, and it was in exceedingly bad repair.
The carpeting was held together by duct tape. Chairs would break as soon as patrons sat down. Gold leaf was tarnished from years of smoking.
We had been developing a plan to completely renovate the Orpheum Theatre, and we had to raise about $5 million to do it.
So we hired Conrad Schmidt Studios to come in and paint a panel to what it looked like in 1928.
It really struck quite a chord with people, and anytime they came into the theater, there was that one piece where you could see in your mind's eye how lovely it would be if we could just have the whole theater looking like this.
Through the support of Memphians, the foundation secured the funds for the project.
We designated 1983 as a one-year period of time in which we would stop and reverse all of the damage that had been done to the theater.
The makeover would be fabulous. The future would prove to be unbelievable and far beyond everyone's expectations. The public first viewed the magnificently restored Orpheum on January 7, 1984. The theme of the evening was champagne and Gershwin. About 2,500 eager patrons filled the auditorium as the stage filled with performances by the ballet, the opera, and the symphony. It was a truly magical evening.
Just can't imagine how beautiful it was.
People assumed that the theater would look beautiful, but if you could see the look on their faces when they walked into the grand lobby, you could tell they were in awe of the Orpheum Theatre once again.
With the Orpheum Theatre fully restored to its former splendor, Memphis was once again ready to invite the great names in entertainment to perform there.
Hasn't this all really been something? I mean, all of us being back together again here on the Orpheum stage in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes, if someone famous was coming to Memphis, chances are they were coming to the Orpheum. And it seems everyone has played the Orpheum.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing. Everything that...
When Cary Grant came to the Orpheum and I was giving him a tour, he said to me, "This is one of the most beautiful theaters I've ever seen." And this is a guy that had seen a lot of theaters. Gregory Peck said the same thing 2 years later when he was on stage at the Orpheum.
They smile when they are low. Yesterday they told you you would not go far. That night you opened and there you are. Next day on your dressing room they hung a star. Let's go on with the show.
In the early 90s, a new genre of mega musicals swept onto Broadway. Phantom of the Opera, Sunset Boulevard, Miss Saigon. They were huge productions requiring an enormous stage area and new technical equipment never before required. And the Orpheum's old 1928 vaudeville-sized stage would exclude the possibility of these shows coming to Memphis. Memphis wanted Phantom, and it was going to take another Herculean-sized effort to get it.
It's the most famous wall in Memphis, and as it came down today, so did a piece of this city's history. Newswatch reporter Lisa Weinstein has the story.
The wall came tumbling down. The Orpheum Theatre's expansion is underway to expand the back wall by 80 feet. But this is no ordinary wall. Carol Channing, Cary Grant, Anthony Quinn, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and many others signed this famous wall.
The 1996-97 renovation was the biggest and most expensive ever for the 70-year-old structure.
Construction at the Orpheum Theatre sets the stage for an award-winning musical.
Crews spent months drilling, sawing, soldering, and pounding. The back wall was knocked out and the stage almost doubled in size. Finally, Memphis was ready for Phantom.
The stage expansion in 1997 was probably the most important development in the theater's history. We could now do anything. We could do the big touring Broadway shows, the big concerts. We could do it all. If you take a stroll down the backstage hallway, you'll see the true legacy of the Orpheum lining the walls.
Come on, babe, why don't we paint the town? And all that jazz.
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. If I were a rich man,
Daylight, I must wait for the sunrise. I must think of the new life, and I mustn't give in. Ever since we first saw the light, my dad and mama like to shake it on a Saturday night. So don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is, I never left you.
There's a line at the end of the tunnel. Sing it, y'all. There's a line at the end of the tunnel.
I like to be in America. Okay, by me in America. Everything free in America.
For a small fee in America.
I'm flying. Flying, flying, flying. Look at me way up high. Suddenly, here am I. I'm flying. He's flying.
Walk like a man, fast as I can. Walk like a man from you. I'll tell the world, forget about it, girl. Walk like a man from you.
Tell them how I am defying gravity. I'm flying high, defying gravity, and soon I'll match them in renown.
One table, I love the way the people sing. When I go, I will love their little secrets. So, one table, what's another mountain revolution? Ready for this. Tomorrow will lose. Tomorrow is the judgment day.
Tomorrow we'll discover what our God in heaven has in store.
Phoebe, arise, a gleam in her eyes, and the year turns round again. And like Barney Corn, who rose from the grave, a new year will rise up again.
I believe that God lives on a planet called Cola. I believe that Jesus has his own planet as well. And I believe that the
the garish light of day. Turn your thoughts away from cold, unfeeling light. We're going down, down, down. We're going down, we're going down, down, down. All I know is Memphis lives. All I know is Memphis lives. All I know is Memphis lives in me.
It's the circle of life, and it moves us all through despair and hope, through faith and love.
Since the Orpheum was originally opened, this has been a special place to a lot of people for many, many different reasons. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, you know, I had my first date here with my wife or my husband. Over the past 35 years, I've been very proud to see the Orpheum develop into the Mid-South Performing Arts Center, serving Memphis in a way that it deserves.
I read an article about the 7 vital signs of a city, and one of those is preserving those landmarks, those buildings that are just immediately associated with the character and history of the city. The Orpheum is one of those.
They've made it just a source of pride for our family. Every time anyone goes there, we think, this is phenomenal.
When I look back and think that, you know, it was possible that the Orpheum might not have been and would be a parking lot, it's just almost impossible to think of what we would have lost because of the magnitude of it.
It anchors that section of our city. I dare say that there are folks who walk by there and just feel that, you know, as long as the Orpheum is here, everything's going to be all right in Memphis, because it's such a positive tie to the past.
The Orpheum Theatre is truly one of Memphis's most remarkable success stories. A theater able to overcome a variety of adversities that ranged from several untimely bankruptcies, a devastating fire, the decay of downtown Memphis, and the constant threat of demolition. Yet the South's finest theater rose above all to become a pioneer in the rebirth of a city, a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of the heart and charm that makes this city great. I'm Stacy Keach.
The Orpheum Theatre is it's a beautiful, beautiful theater. I mean, there it is, you know, right up on Beale. It's a staple of this great city, and it matters. And I'm glad that there's so much effort put into making sure it keeps on mattering.
So the Orpheum Theatre, I have to say, having been in a lot of theaters in my lifetime and worked in a lot of theaters, it's pretty much as beautiful a theater as I've ever seen.
I mean, who would have ever thought that I could be around long enough to actually walk into this history and be a part of it instead of kicking chaos somewhere in a field of mud. So it looks like I've come of age in this beautiful building.
When I'm playing the theater, I feel a great connection, not just because I'm from Memphis, but because these people really do hear, and it isn't muddy. The sound is very resonant. And so for me, it's a particularly good house to play. So invite me back. I'll come back and I'd love to play it again.